And I think here, what I notice is that many of the governments are quickly jumping in to bail out, whether it is the airlines or the tourism suppliers. But I think in regenerative tourism, we need to look at bailing out the damaged environment or the cultural environment. We need to bail that out, and not bail out the perpetrators, who actually created this environment. I'm sorry, but I think it could hurt the cruise companies or whoever, but whoever has been guilty of the mistakes of mass tourism and ecological damage. I think we have to be really careful about who is it that we are bailing out under
Welcome to
such
crTALKS.
conditions.
In this series of travel readiness conversations, I'll be talking to experts, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, key stakeholders on how destinations and businesses are getting ready to resume tourism after COVID-19. Thanks for watching. I'm Fazal, your host for today.
Hi, Nisha. Welcome to our show. Thanks for your time. So today I really want to discuss with you what the impact of COVID-19 will be on one of the topics that you're passionate about, which is sustainable tourism.
Sustainable tourism. Yes.
And so let's get started. So tell
Thank
us
you,
about.
Fazal, first of all, for the invitation. And it's my pleasure to be here with you, speaking about my topic, passion, that is sustainable tourism. Yes.
Yeah, so I think sustainable tourism was gaining such a lot of momentum, last year, and people were really beginning to embrace, and then we are hit with this COVID-19. So what do you think the impact is going to be, post-COVID for these subjects like sustainable tourism, over tourism, and we had so many those kind of angles which were really picking up. And what do you think will be the impact post-COVID-19?
I think you've just touched on a really interesting word, the over-tourism. We have shifted from the whole, research and talks all about over-tourism. That was, the hot topic of 2019, I think, and suddenly in 2020, we are now in this under-tourism thing, right? And everyone is now looking at what is this all about? What does it translate to? But I think the under-tourism also gave us at a time. The slow tourism is not, to me, necessarily a bad thing, because we have gone through, I would term it as an ecological grief, where we were actually witnessing how insensible we have been in the tourism industry with our haphazard development, mass developments. And now is the time to really re-look at our mistakes that we have done. And it's time to prioritize, mindful and responsible development. The pandemic, to me, has become like an equalizer. It is time to kind of bring things to a balance. It's a really nice, peaceful time, I would say, that's brought to a balance. And what we would call, as scholars, we use this word transformative term, where we are doing an evolutionary, hopefully, a resetting of new pathways. And I've come to also look at the fact that maybe it's not sustainable development that we need to be talking about, but let's look at regenerative forms of tourism. What we mean by regenerative is not just to sustain or to be mindful, but also to look at the kind of damage that has already been created, and now to recreate the conditions under which tourism can flourish. Whether it's an ecological environment or the local environment, the cultural environment can flourish. It's a very powerful word to use. It's not just develop, but to flourish. So today, I think we are beginning to be very careful about the word sustainable development, but looking at perhaps, regenerative development. And what this looks at.
Explain what you mean by regenerative tourism.
Yeah, so like what I mean, it's not just to sustain or to retain it, but looking and addressing how we have created this ecological grief and damage, and how we could go about, collectively address these conditions and re-look at our development again, and creating a, flourish in terms of our ecological as well as cultural environment. And that's really what regenerative tourism is all about. And I think here, what I notice is that many of the governments are quickly jumping in to bail out, whether it is the airlines or the tourism suppliers. But I think in regenerative tourism, we need to look at bailing out the damaged environment or the cultural environment. We need to bail that out, and not bail out the perpetrators, who actually created this environment. I'm sorry, but I think it could hurt the cruise companies or whoever, but whoever has been guilty of the mistakes of mass tourism and ecological damage, I think we have to be really careful about who is it that we are bailing out under such conditions.
And in terms of, you mentioned, we did, tourism did mistakes. What do you, give us some examples, maybe some of the mistakes that, mistakes in the sense, of course, tourism is a huge contributor to GDP. So all countries try to increase tourism and all that. So it's understandable. So what sort of things that they probably should have done differently?
Well, I think in terms of tourism development, we should have been a little bit more mindful about the way in which we were doing massive forms of development. We were not careful or sensitive to the locals' living conditions. So these are just some of the things that resulted in the whole tourist phobia, over tourism conditions, the reactions of the local people in Italy towards the tourists. We had actually dug our own graves when it comes to tourism. And also, I think mistakes in terms of mass tourism where we had compromised our profitability. We were doing cutthroat pricing and killing each other to a point that we were cutting down on the quality of service that we were offering to people. So these were some of the mistakes, and it's time to really rethink and relook and reset the pathways.
True. I think, I empathize and, I sympathize with the whole, the sustainable tourism is key, but we are here, now, we had mass tourism for many, many years, which has provided massive amount of jobs, hundreds of millions of jobs in the tourism industry. And of course, I keep hearing now, yes, not only you, but some others saying, yes, we would prefer a smaller tourism industry. I think that's good. I assume it's good for the ecology, the community. But what will happen to the jobs? Hundreds of millions of jobs at stake. How do we solve that?
Yes, I think very valid point that you have raised, because certainly what has gone or what has happened, the fear of travel, to restrictions, to contactless travel, to digitalization, all this is certainly going to result in the loss of lives and livelihoods that are in our industry. And we are supportive of, we support so many different types of jobs and, so many different types of people in our industry as well. So it is certainly going to put us all in a very challenging situations. I think we are already witnessing in countries which are highly, highly dependent on tourism, Bali, for example, Thailand, for example, but I think it's also a very important time. Like what Singapore is trying to do here is to re-look at our alternative tourism development, going back to sustainable development. For a long time, I always felt that tourism has been focused on the hubs in many cities, whether it's, say, for example, in Malaysia, it has all been in Kuala Lumpur or in Bangkok, or in India's Mumbai and Delhi. Rightfully, what tourism development is that it should be spreading the economic development to the peripheral areas. It should go to the rural areas or remote areas, This is the time perhaps to re-look at alternative forms of tourism development. Can we bring tourism to the peripheral areas? Can we spend some time to be more inclusive, like what Korea is trying to do? Is trying to be moving towards a more inclusive form of tourism, including, of course, the handicapped and physically disabled within their destination by rebuilding their infrastructure. So perhaps, we could look at manpower to be put into these sort of tourism development. We could also look at alternative business models. Maybe we could be overstaffed in our industry. Maybe that's why our cost of business has been very high and our profit margins have been very low. So what Singapore is trying to do is redeploy people in our industry to alternative industries that may require our specialized and very high quality staff. Giving you a very good example is where Singapore Airlines staff are now put as patient ambassadors in the healthcare industry. We train our hospitality people with really, really high quality service orientation, and the healthcare can benefit from that. Right. And of course, the retail can benefit from that. I think this is where, in cross-industry collaborations and partnerships are happening. We are learning from other industries as well. We are learning from the Googles and so forth to digitalize our economy so that as today, we are noticing that customers have less time. And we saw that pre-COVID, people are time poor. Not money poor, but time poor. And they want everything fast, fast, fast. But our industry has been very slow to adopt digitalization. We have been very slow to adopt, technology and faster ways of doing business, And again, this is a time that we could train our staff, reskill our staff. So I feel that this is an era, that is providing us a fantastic opportunity if our industry is able to relook at that, of redeployment, working in collaboration with other industries. Maybe take it as a time where, where we actually, it's like service learning, you put them in another industry, let them learn the best practices, and then they come back when our industry is ready. And this is when we can transfer knowledge. There are certain industries that are doing really, really well at the moment, and they need people from our tourism and hospitality industry. So can two organizations, for example, in Singapore Airlines working with the Khoo Teck Puat Hospital, and they are exchanging labor. Today, I saw another company, which is really interesting, from a tourism company in Sri Lanka. And what they're doing is offering, they said, we want to keep our staff, our staff from a marketing department. We want to keep our staff from the technology department and our digital guys, but we don't have enough jobs for them, So we are now selling our services to anybody in any industry who would give us jobs so that we could retain our staff. So what is that? It's really about partnerships. It's about collaboration. It's about new business model. Why should you always be selling travel and hospitality related services? Why don't you sell, your accounting services or your digital marketing services or something that you've been really good at, your CSR related services, to another industry that may need it and you still can monetize?
True.
Yeah,
so
interesting ways. Yeah.
True, I understand, but I think I agree with all what you say, but my biggest challenge of understanding is that less developed countries where millions of them are deployed in the travel industry and tourism industry, redeploying at a fast pace is not a viable solution. It will take time, and that will impact livelihoods a lot. If the tourism doesn't come back to at least some decent levels of what it was in 2019, livelihood will be massively impacted. Singapore is such a small place, so many things could be done. We are a very developed place as well, high GDP.
But small again, Fazal, I would say that we have our own challenges and problem too. We don't have something called domestic tourism. We don't have something called regional tourism. And therefore, the crisis has provided us a very important situation where we reevaluate what we are all about. And I think it's interesting because crisis is what allows us to think about the fact that we cannot solve this problem being alone, as a country on its own, as a company on its own, because it's a wicked problem, it's a complex, wicked problem. So it gives us this time where we have to look at collaborations, we have to look at partnerships, an expanded global consciousness. I noticed certain companies, like there was one company here, they provided coaching and mentoring services, and they're saying that, we offer these services, but would you be able to donate a portion of the money that you're giving for this consultancy or coaching services to help a hotel in Bali, a resort in Bali. So someone in Singapore offering a coaching consultancy work is saying, would you put certain percentage of what you would pay to support a hotel in Bali. Isn't that amazing? Where we are now looking at a very expanded, form of global consciousness. So I agree that certain countries may not have the money, the power, the muscle that we may have, but we are also, in being small, presents a lot of crisis. Being big presents another problem. But this is where we should start looking at how we could support each other globally, and break down these borders. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, my only thing is that I think we had good momentum on sustainable tourism and all that. So I think it would have really turned out to be something. But my worry now is that, I mean, I was talking to Thailand tourism the other day, like, they employ like 4 million people and 2 million people will go out of job now.
yes.
I mean, how do you, working around those kind of problems is not easy.
No, it's not.
They are, it's really not easy. Anyway, I think that's something that we need to, as in the industry, we need to really look at,
Yeah, but I feel that this turbulence, as we had seen in other crises, although this is something very different, but in this turbulence, you would see, some of these players will start to sieve out. They will fall out for sure. New ones are going to emerge. You may think that there's no space for new ones, but I am very hopeful that new players are going to emerge from this crisis, just like in the past, right?
Yeah.
And those who could not have good business practices, sensible business practices, are definitely going to be dropping out of the race. And that's when I think evolutionary pathways are going to be created.
Yeah, I think that the biggest problem I see is that when there is even a fast evolution of the landscape, the workforce has still time to retrain, redeploy, and to be to another industry. But this is so short notice, so redeploying, retraining in such a short, there'll be new players emerging. Will this workforce fit into the new emerging players? It's probably it's going to be tough. Because they'll be in a different landscape. So that's the struggle that I have in understanding how all this, we say, okay, small is good, but we have a big issue. How do we solve that issue? So that's my sort of take on. I mean, yes, I mean, we all agree that we should be small, but then we have had a big problem. But how do we resolve that? Because these people are not going to be redeployed, retrained overnight, and there are millions of them.
Yes. You see, what I see is that all these situations that are happening around the world, the total turbulence, I would see is creating dissonance on two sides: supply side and demand side. Supply side dissonance because people are finding that we don't have money, the profit margins or whatever we had is too thin, and the business models are not working at the moment, and therefore people are going to companies. I'm talking about the supply side, will have to rethink of new business models, and I'm witnessing it all around me. I mean, I think the fatigue has already withered off. People are now thinking. The energy is being put into thinking processes. I've been listening to really, really interesting business ideas, and it's quite amazing how collaborations are happening between technology providers and our tourism people. That's quite nice. The dissonance is also going to happen on the part of travelers. Travelers are sick and tired. We're not able to travel. People are beginning to rethink about what sort of travel I want to engage in. What have I been doing? Traveling, and maybe not even arriving at as a traveler or a tourist. What kind of travel do I want? So and would I go back to the same form of travel, to crowded cities? People are saying, no, I wouldn't want to. I want to be in remote places. I want physical and safe distancing right now. People are more conscious about their health today. While we are distancing, there is a need for social connectedness already. So there's a lot of things that when you listen to travelers and what are they saying is that you are looking at a new breed of travelers coming up. And that's what I mentioned to you earlier, that, maybe we should look at travel development at peripheral areas, remote areas, because people don't want to move to crowded places anymore. Let's go back in time, okay? Let's think about in the 19th century, when aristocrats, right, looked at travel as a form of like, it's like a sanitarium, they wanted to escape from the pollution. They want to escape from the diseases, right? And then they went to the remote places, they went away to seaside areas, right? And that is what is going to happen, right? It's like a sanitarium. People want to move away to remote places. So why don't we start thinking about development? And that's what sustainable development is all about. Develop the outskirts, develop the peripheral areas, regional sort of tourism in destinations. So we might see that because of the dissonance that people are feeling at the moment, that's a new breed of niche forms of travel behavior. And that becomes a very interesting study for scholars or whoever is researching, is that what is the psychology of the traveler of the post-COVID era? What is really going to happen?
Yeah, I think that's maybe we'll more a little bit onto that one. Maybe what will. I mean, we at the end of the day, so there are so many unknowns than knowns on that part. How will the traveler behave and traveler sentiments? We are making a lot of judgmental calls on that anyway currently, based on some evidence. But anyway, let's do that anyway. What do you think? Will be some of the behavioral changes and sentiments of future travelers?
Yeah, so as I said, environmental consciousness is definitely going to be there. People are going to be thinking about health and wellness. And I know of some tour operators already planning of health and wellness forms of travel. It's interesting, it's important now to re-look at interpretation. We have not really focused so much on education and interpretation in travel experiences. So we could tourism attractions or tourism boards to really think carefully about interpretation when travelers are starting to travel again. Could we educate them? I was just having a conversation with someone, and we have always been an industry that is always about our facial expressions. We've got to smile. That's what hospitality is all about. But think about it. In the future, you're going to wear a mask. And where is your smile going to be? You cannot move close to people. So when there's contactless travel, how is service going to look like? And what would consumers or travelers want when it comes to service? As we say, trust is the new currency. Yeah. What is this trust? Is trusting the operations, trusting the destination, but it's also trust between the host and the guest today. That is going to create a form of comfort level, when we start to travel. So there's a lot of interesting things that is going to unfold, and we have to start thinking about it. And I think research has to move into this area, to in the minds of the consumer or the traveler, what would quality service look like in a contactless world?
Yeah, but do you think that mask will stay that long? I think people are going to be. I mean, a lot of people in the world, we wear masks. So if the option is there not to wear, we won't wear. I mean, nobody wants to do that, So will we not have a situation where as soon as things are getting better, people are not going to get rid of the mask? And so that issue of mask wearing will disappear?
It's anybody's call, I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic about it. I'm a very optimistic person, but who says this will be the last of the crisis? With pandemics, I mean, there's been a lot of research talking about pandemics and different forms of, pandemics that may happen, So let's learn from this and we get prepared, for us to understand what is traveler psychology going to be like when a situation like this happens, and we have to start thinking about what is this whole thing about trust and human-centered communication is really important. We have to realize that I use this word, this infoxication that is around us, info obesity, if you want to call it. There's so much of negativity in terms of information, of fear, and fake news and all that. And as travel providers, as destinations, what kind of news are we going to be communicating with travelers? The ideas of hope and possibility is very important.
Yes, I mean, yeah, you talked about, I mean, trust is the new currency, as you say. So let's say, how do you, from a service provider point of view, like hotels, attractions, how do they build trust?
So the trust factor, I think, is open communication. It's very, very important. Transparency in communication. And of course, that whole notion of human-centered communication. It focus on what we used to call empathy, right? Brand empathy in design thinking. But I think it's very important to look at the consumer, and it's not about your organization and saying what we are doing, in terms of safety and health, but turn the point around to the consumer and think about what is it that they really want when they start traveling.
All right.
And that's what I mean. Intelligence today is very important. Intelligence in terms of research and understanding human psychology. A lot of effort has got to go into that sort of new knowledge. And I think from what we hear, people are the facts and the factual information that is surrounding us is there. Some of it is of course fake news. That's what I said, intoxication is there. But I think we should really redirect our communication and our marketing efforts towards the consumer and understanding where are they coming from, what is their comfort level, what is the confidence that they want when they start to travel, transparency.
All right.
And the accountability.
In terms of demographics, if you look at demographics for the next, because there are so many, let's say, assumptions or predictions or projections that certain groups of people probably will travel earlier. The millennials will probably, be the first who will sort of start traveling. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, I agree. I think millennials will be the first to go. I think there's lots of research done about the millennials, even pre-COVID, and we know it's a market that has got the power to travel, the mindset to travel. So that is definitely a market that we should be targeting. The other, I think, is the high-yield traveler. Because if we go into high quality, high yield, yesterday, of course, I was reading an article that talks about private jet seems to be picking up and doing really well. Private islands are doing well at the moment. So consumers with the high purchasing power who are able to afford to go to remote places where it's not crowded, or to be in the private islands, or, getting a private jet or private charter of a cruise, they would be the next one. So high yield tourism destinations are going to see a comeback faster than other destinations that were targeting the mass tourists, the budget travelers.
Right. Okay, I think that's good stuff, Nisha. Thanks for sharing. How about, I think maybe one last question. Maybe, people, Singapore, of course, although you say that it doesn't have a domestic market, there is a domestic tourism numbers for for Singapore. Don't know how it's classified as, but anyway, but I think domestic tourism is where a lot of countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, everybody's targeting. Everybody's trying to revive, and they're doing a lot of things in terms of encouraging domestic tourism. What could the stakeholders do in terms of encouraging domestic tourism at this point in time?
Yes. First of all, you have to believe that domestic tourism has got huge potential. It has been a neglected market. We become brand ambassadors of our own destinations when we are familiar with our own destinations. Lots of research has gone to show that VFR, visiting friends and relatives market, is actually a highly attractive market. And we never understood the potential of locals being brand ambassadors of a country. So if you understand the potential, what would you do is that you would target the locals to understand your destination really well. One is, of course, to make money, while the period, where we are not receiving international tourists. But I think you should be a little bit, mindful of your objective too. It's not just about profitability, but what do we want our locals to do for us when the market picks up? How do we turn them to become brand ambassadors and marketeers of a destination, or of tourism attractions or tourism products? What kind of, so I told you, we should have interpretation and education as part of the way that we sell our tourism attraction and destination. If we give people the right information, the right tools, should we look at tools, in fact? What sort of tools can we give the locals so that when the market picks up, will they help us market our destinations? Should we work on the mindset of the locals to tell them how important tourism is when things pick up? Know your destination really well. It's just like when I go to a hotel and I train the hotels, I always tell them, get your staff to know your lunch products, your dinner products, your hotel rooms. If you can, let your staff stay in your hotels rooms to understand your product and your F&B, your menu, and so forth. So when they sell with that passion and they sell with that conviction, isn't it? So it's the same, if you want to sell your destination, who should be the ones who should be your ambassadors? And who do we trust? Word of mouth, who do we trust? Our locals, right? Yeah. So should we be marketing to our locals in a way? Should we give them the right tools to help us sell our destination? What sort of education and interpretation should we give the locals so that when its time is right, they become our brand ambassadors? To me, I think that's more important than looking at how should we sell in terms of economics. Right. Our destination to make up for the numbers until the tourists come, and then we ignore the locals and then go for the tourists. That should not be the mindset today. I hope that shifts happen, that we focus on the locals and let the locals do the selling.
Thanks a lot, Nisha. Thanks for your thought, and pleasure to have you, and hope to have you in our future sessions as well.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and my best wishes to you, Crescent Rating and Halal Trip, and to everyone else in our tourism and hospitality industry. We are in this together, and we will come out of this together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching CR Talks. In the next episodes, we will be talking to more travel industry stakeholders on how they are overcoming challenges to rebuild the travel industry. So join us on our next episodes. Until then, goodbye.